A fire lights up the midnight sky.
There were flames shooting out the windows.
The owners of the home nowhere to be found.
We came across the remains of a fire victim.
Was it an accident or was it intentional?
In some point during the evening, I remember communicating with our county homicide unit.
When you heard there had been a threat to burn the house down, what went through your mind?
It was like a foreshadowing of what was going to happen.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Duquesne, Pennsylvania, a small suburb of Pittsburgh. When a home was ravaged by a fire, investigators worked tirelessly to figure out how it started. And what they found underneath the burnt rubble was something that no one was prepared for. It was a cold winter's night when a fire lit up the sky, and residents on Friendship Street watched in horror as their neighbor's house became engulfed in flames. One of them called 911.
It came in as a fire call after midnight on December 30th.
The first to arrive at the scene was a local Duquesne police officer. Neighbors told her the home belonged to James and Maureen Carr. Why were the neighbors so worried?
I recall some of the neighbors saying that they haven't seen the occupants, any time recently before the fire.
Worried that the couple was still inside, the officer ran towards the house to help.
She tried to go in a side door, and the fire was just way too intense. She could not enter and be safe on her own, so she had to back out and wait for the fire department.
Moments later, fire trucks began to arrive. The home was burning uncontrollably.
There were flames shooting out the windows. There was some damage to the neighboring house. If you're looking to the front of the Carr's house, the house to the left, their siding was melting. So it was a very intense fire, and it spread fairly quickly from what we could tell.
Chief Deputy Fire Marshal Don Brucker was called to the scene.
It was definitely a huge fire. It was a bigger, older home, kind of sat a little bit above grade on the high side of the roadway. I remember arriving at the scene, and there were still flames actively burning through multiple levels through the roof, venting out windows. Multiple fire companies were on scene trying to effect suppression activities, but there were a lot of obstacles in the way.
It took several hours and multiple fire agencies to finally get it under control.
It was a very catastrophic fire. Obviously the house was totaled and uninhabitable after that.
When he was finally given the all clear, Deputy Brucker and his team went inside to start their investigation.
The entire building was charred from top to bottom, with the exception of the basement. I remember making access in the basement. The only damage down there I recall seeing was water and smoke residual damage. The first floor was heavily fire damaged.
Investigators did an initial walkthrough of the home to try and pinpoint where the fire had begun.
Myself and the other investigators were there, came to a conclusion that the fire right now appears to have started in the living room area.
As they got low to the ground to examine the debris, they made a heartbreaking discovery.
We came across the remains of a fire victim, centrally located in the middle of the living room floor.
The victim was so badly burned, it was impossible to say for sure if it was a man or a woman.
Just black char, splitting. You could tell it's a human being, but there's no initial identification markings.
But when the medical examiner's office showed up to remove the body and take a closer look, it was determined the victim was a woman. And there was another shocking discovery.
Her body was badly charred, beyond recognition, but investigators could see that there was wiring on her and near her.
Her hands and wrists appeared to be bound by the wire material. The packaging was found nearby.
It was artificial flower wire. So I'm not big into crafting, but we started to dig in a little bit to find that stuff out. And it is more of a really light gauge green wire you can buy in spools or a thimble, if you will. And it's used for putting together artificial flower arrangement.
Suddenly, the fire investigation had turned into something much darker.
You have a fire victim that is bound with wire. So at that point, in some point during the evening, I remember communicating with our county homicide unit.
They know this is foul play. This is, somebody's tied up. So they're not questioning whether this is an accident. They know it's a crime. Now it's, how did this happen and who did it?
There were broken bottles, he was slashing the tires.
Maureen and James were not getting along.
The cracks started to show.
After the body was removed from the home for autopsy, fire investigators continued to search for clues about what caused the massive blaze. Everything they found pointed towards arson.
The fire was then classified as incendiary nature, and that was our conclusion based on a lot of work and a lot of scene processing and teamwork with our fellow investigators.
With that ruling, the case was now a homicide investigation. The victim was positively identified as 56-year-old Maureen Carr. Her autopsy told a horrifying story about the way she was murdered.
There was carbon monoxide poisoning as well as cyanide found in her bloodstream. She was breathing during the process of the fire.
She wasn't killed and then bound. She would have suffered. She would have died from the fire and the smoke inhalation.
Detectives broke the news to Maureen's family. They learned she was one of 7 children and extremely close to her sisters.
They described her as a very bubbly person, liked to have fun.
She was described as such a beloved member of her family. She had 2 jobs. She took care of a neighbor's disabled child. Just a person that really lit up the room.
Maureen had been married for 14 years to James Carr, but they had recently separated. He moved out and was living with his mother about 20 minutes away. Before investigators went to speak with him, they wanted to know details about the couple's relationship.
At first, she had been very happy to meet him, and then the cracks started to show.
Maureen told those close to her that James would drink and do drugs, and they would get into a lot of arguments.
Maureen and James were not getting along. I think James had become a little bit emotionally abusive.
Police say Maureen was unhappy and tired of dealing with him.
As her relationship with James wore on, a lot of that light seemed to go away.
After an argument one night in early December, she finally had enough. Investigators say when she asked him to move out, he exploded and threatened her.
There were broken bottles, he was slashing the tires.
She went to the court and got a temporary PFA. That's a protection from abuse order.
There was a hearing to make the PFA permanent just 2 days before Maureen was killed in the fire.
On that date, December 28th, he came to court under the impression that he was going to have to do some counseling and be able to get back with his wife, and that was not the case.
During the hearing, James began to shake uncontrollably and told the judge he was having an epileptic seizure. The judge sent him home.
The case was reset for a date in January.
But sadly, Maureen died before that court date could happen. All eyes turned to James Carr, who became the prime suspect in his estranged wife's murder.
It was like a foreshadowing of what was going to happen.
She had witnessed James, I'll burn the house down before I let you leave.
Armed with the details about his rocky marriage and recent breakup, investigators went to speak with James Carr. They found him at his mother's house. What did he say when detectives asked him about the fire that killed Maureen?
He denied any involvement with Maureen.
James told detectives he knew about the fire because a neighbor had called to tell him that his house was burning down. He said he had spent that night out with friends. Investigators worked to verify his alibi.
I, along with my partner, went to track down people that were reportedly with Maureen's estranged husband in the hours leading up to the fire starting the night before.
One friend named Cliff told police that he did go out with James in Duquesne that night. They went to a bar and then to another friend's home. It seemed to verify James' alibi, and Cliff told detectives that at some point in the night, he realized James had disappeared.
Sometime between 8 and 9, Cliff said that James just sort of left, and the friends became concerned because they did know about the PFA, and they were a little worried that James might have been going to Maureen's, and they knew he shouldn't be there, so they did go and look to see if he had gone to the house, and they did not see him there.
Cliff said James never came back, so he went home. Then at 12:07 a.m., he got a call from him.
James said, "Hey, I'm outside. Can you give me a ride home?" Cliff said, I don't have a lot of gas in my car, but I can take you part of the way. So he took James to a gas station that was sort of halfway between Duquesne and South Park. And Cliff said it was his understanding that James's mother was going to come get him.
Cliff then told police that right after he dropped off James, he got a call from another friend who told him that James's home was burning down.
He calls James right away and he's like, "Hey, your house is on fire." And James was pretty nonchalant. I think that's even the word that Cliff used. He said he was nonchalant about it.
Detectives couldn't believe it. If what Cliff was saying were the truth, then the timing of when James showed up at Cliff's home for the ride was around the same time that a neighbor called 911 to report the fire. How were you able to verify what Cliff was telling you?
We went to the gas station and we did find video surveillance from that BP gas station. And it lined up with the timeline that Cliff had. We could see Cliff pull up with James. James gets out of the car. He goes into the convenience store. Cliff leaves.
Since Cliff lived within walking distance to Maureen's home, it was entirely possible for James to set the fire and run to Cliff's house. James had the motive and the means, but investigators still needed more.
Another detective found a neighbor who said that he called James, not knowing about the PFA, thinking James was in the house, and he said, "I see smoke coming out of your house, And he said, "Oh, I don't live there anymore." And the guy said, "Well, is Maureen there? You need to get her out of there." And he goes, "I can't call her. I don't have her phone number, and I have a PFA anyway. I'm not allowed to talk to her." And again, like, blasé, not concerned.
Another neighbor who was friends with Maureen came forward to tell police something chilling.
She had witnessed James threaten Maureen and specifically said, "I'll burn the house down before I let you leave and take it."
It's like a foreshadowing of what was going to happen.
The circumstantial evidence against James Carr was adding up, but there was nothing physical to tie him to the fire and Maureen's murder. Investigators went back to the one piece of evidence they had in the case.
The floral wire was obviously an issue. Where did it come from? Who introduced it into the scene?
They did a search warrant of James's mom's house and found that exact type of wiring in her house.
James' mom was crafty and used it to make holiday decorations. With the discovery of the wire, detectives felt as if they had enough to make an arrest, but still hoped that Carr would confess.
They brought Mr. Carr to their headquarters and began questioning him about the night's events at that point in time.
Sensing that police were closing in on him, Carr stopped talking and asked for an attorney. Before they left the room, though, detectives told him that he was being charged with Maureen's murder.
So he was left with his thoughts for about 15 minutes. And then he knocked on the interview room door and asked to talk to the detective again.
Detectives came back inside and Carr started talking.
At first, he kept saying, I don't remember. I just don't remember. I was drinking that night. I did crack that night. I just don't remember what happened.
But as the questioning continued, he buckled under pressure.
He said, well, when I went to my wife's house, and then he realized he had slipped up, and the detective pounced on that and said, okay, you were at your wife's house. Let's keep going now.
He then gave investigators his version of what happened that night, which began with showing up to Maureen's home with an axe.
He came in, he did have, the axe in his hand, but he said his wife, Maureen, came at him and he pushed back on her, so she hit her head on the kitchen counter, and he tried to resuscitate her but couldn't. So at that point, he bound her, dragged her into the living room, and set the fire.
Did he say what he used to start the fire?
Vodka. Yeah, he poured a bottle of vodka all over her and then left a trail from her body to the back door of the house and lit it from the back door of the house.
Police say he then walked away as the home went up in flames with Maureen inside, unable to escape.
The house burned around her, and there were also 2 dogs at home. Both of them perished in the fire.
James Carr went to trial for the first-degree murder of his wife, Maureen, opting for a judge instead of a jury to decide his fate. Prosecutor Mike Sullivan argued the murder came down to one thing.
It's a domestic violence case, and in my years of being a domestic violence prosecution expert, power and control is the name and game of domestic violence.
For years, James had that power and control over Maureen until she decided she had had enough.
When she got that PFA, James was losing power and control. And when he went to the final PFA hearing and it didn't go as expected, then at that point he's desperate, and he takes the ultimate act of power and control and took her life.
The judge wasn't convinced that the crime was premeditated and found James Carr guilty of second-degree murder. Still, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. While a court order of protection is one way to help protect yourself from an abusive partner, it may not be enough to ensure your physical safety, particularly if you have shared a residence with your abuser. For additional protection, change your locks and security codes and avoid letting a hostile ex into the residence, especially if they have a weapon or are under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Call police to alert them that your abuser is present and in violation of the order of protection. And for additional safety information and resources, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.
Someone was lying in wait and knew what time that she came home.
Mary was lying on her back on the floor of her living room, and there were some wood fragments on the floor next to her. She'd obviously been attacked and strangled and killed.
She was just known to have this outgoing personality and was very friendly. She was well loved and respected by her friends.
I can't imagine the despair and the horror of having someone burst into your apartment, the sanctity of your home, in order to commit this atrocious crime.
Did any of Mary's neighbors call 911 when they heard the attack?
The neighbors heard screams, the footsteps, and the crashing noises.
And no one called the police. But it's possible that this murder might never have occurred if one of the neighbors had picked up the phone and called the police.
How would you describe Mary's killing?
a despicable human being, a violent, horrible person.
When he denied even knowing her, being with her, I knew he was the guy, right? Just no question. What went through my mind was, we got him. He's done.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to San Diego, California, home to one of the largest naval fleets in the world. It was here that a 23-year-old was viciously attacked just moments after she returned home from work. As detectives analyzed the shocking evidence left at the scene, they feared the only way to catch the predator was if he attacked again. It was around 8 p.m. when Mary Scott's friends stopped by her apartment and were surprised when she didn't answer the door.
They looked through the window and saw that the lights and the television were on, and at this time, it was approximately maybe 2:30 in the morning. They tried the door and the door was unlocked, and when her friends entered the apartment, they saw Mary sprawled in the living room, a few feet away from the front door.
Mary was lying on her back on the floor of her living room, just kind of inside the front door, strangled to death. She was covered up when the investigators got there because the friend kind of covered her up to preserve her modesty.
They quickly called 911, and when police arrived, it was clear the 23-year-old had been the victim of a savage attack.
She had dried blood coming from her mouth, bruising to her face. It appeared that she had been sexually assaulted. She was sprawled on her back. It was obvious that her clothes had been ripped.
Lying on the ground was part of the broken door frame.
And there were some wood fragments on the floor next to her. So she'd obviously been attacked and strangled and killed.
Detectives scanned the room for clues to the killer's motive.
Her wallet and her purse were nearby, and it was pretty obvious that it was not a robbery.
We kind of feel the attack was sexually motivated. And in fact, there were signs that she had been raped. There was physical evidence on her body. So the officers did a good job in collecting and preserving that particular evidence.
As detectives set out to find her killer, Mary's loved ones were reeling from the horrific news. The sweet and vivacious 23-year-old had worked as a go-go dancer at the nearby Star and Garter Club.
What they called back then a go-go dancer. And go-go dancers are not what you consider when you think of the exotic dancer of today. Go-go dancing was far more tame. The bar that she worked at was frequented by military people and by off-duty police officers.
How did her friends describe her personality?
She was just known to have this outgoing personality and was very friendly. She was well loved and respected by her friends.
Well, her nickname was Lucky, and she picked up that name when she was dancing.
The brutality of the crime hit everyone hard.
Really shook up the people that really loved and cared about her.
Police vowed to bring them answers and focused on creating a timeline of her last known steps.
She got off work sometime around 1:50 in the morning and caught a cab ride home.
Police located the taxi driver who had driven her home.
He recalls dropping Mary off at her apartment somewhere around 2:05 in the morning, and he watched her walk to her ground level apartment.
Detectives fanned out to canvass Mary's apartment complex.
Around 2:15 in the morning, one of the neighbors recalled hearing a scream and stomping or footsteps. Also around 2:15, another neighbor recalled hearing a screaming and a loud crash.
Did any of Mary's neighbors call 911 when they heard the attack?
And no one called the police, and that's really sad because possibly, although the arrival time may have been too long, but it's possible that this murder might never have occurred if one of the neighbors had picked up the phone and called the police.
Based on the evidence, detectives believed Mary had been getting ready for bed when she heard a knock on the door.
Mary's habit was when somebody knocked on the door that she wasn't expecting, she would crack open the door to see who it was, and she would leave the safety chain on. Well, apparently this person had hit the door so hard once the door was open that they broke the safety chain and actually the molding off the door.
As detectives launched their investigation, the entire community believed, until the killer was caught, no young woman would be safe.
It was horrendous, and for all the young women out there thinking about, oh my goodness, this could happen to me, I can only imagine it was disturbing to all the young women in the area.
I think the big aspect is that once you get inside your home or your apartment and you shut the door and you lock it, you kind of feel you're safe. And when somebody violates that safety, I can't imagine anything worse.
San Diego detectives investigating Mary Scott's murder hoped the medical examiner's report would provide them with a critical lead. What did the medical examiner determine happened to Mary?
She was brutally raped and strangled.
The evidence showed Mary had been murdered just seconds after she had returned home and locked her door.
I think the big aspect is that once you get inside your home or your apartment and you shut the door and you lock it, you kind of feel you're safe. And when somebody violates that safety, I can't imagine anything worse.
The killer had lured Mary to her door, and it was then the attack began. How would you describe the level of violence involved in Mary's murder?
One of the most vicious that I've seen. It was a blitz attack. I think it happened so quick and so sudden that she really didn't have a chance to fully react. And what the coroner thought was that the opening of the door, the crashing down of the door, actually broke Mary's jaw and knocked her down. That must have been a frightening and horrible death. She's screaming, she's fighting off this attacker, and to come to this kind of end it's hard to swallow.
Law enforcement theorized her murder had been a crime of passion, which led them to zero in on Mary's former boyfriend.
Tom Kraus had been Mary's boyfriend. They had recently broken up, and Tom was taking it kind of hard. And as a matter of fact, he had actually broken in and vandalized her apartment a short time before this attack occurred, not the same night, but a few days before, a week before.
Mary's friends said it had been a tumultuous relationship from the start.
The relationship between Tom and Mary was volatile and off and again, on again, things like that.
Detectives brought the 23-year-old bartender to the station for an interrogation.
He was interviewed. He denied having anything to do with the murder.
Tom Kraus insisted he had nothing to do with Mary's homicide. At the time, investigators didn't have the forensic tools to compare Kraus's DNA to the evidence in the case.
They didn't have an automated fingerprint system. They didn't have DNA.
There was not a lot of testing to be done. As far as blood evidence, I believe that there was AB and O blood testing that could be done at the time, which would identify the blood type of the individual who committed the crime.
They had no way of going any further as far as proving he did it.
And detectives were forced to move on. The community became even more alarmed by a string of violent assaults in the area.
There was a series of similar rapes in that neighborhood at that time.
When another star and garter dancer was attacked, a man named Richard Brown was charged with the assault.
He was a sheriff's deputy who was was arrested for attempting to rape another dancer at the same establishment, the Star and Garter.
How similar was that attack to Mary's homicide?
It was very similar. It was almost identical, where he had broken into the apartment. He'd followed the dancer home on that case.
Investigators pressed Richard Brown about his possible involvement in Mary's case.
He refused to discuss it and talk much about Mary's murder.
But when DNA came on the radar, they asked him to provide a sample to compare with the evidence left at the scene.
He refused to give a sample, and they had to go get a search warrant.
But Richard Brown's DNA was not a match to the evidence in Mary Scott's homicide. The unknown profile was entered into CODIS, the DNA national database, but nothing there came back as a match either. The setbacks were incredibly disappointing, but law enforcement remained laser-focused on bringing Mary's killer to justice.
Law enforcement was very determined, and every time there was a new tool available, that was used to try to get further in the investigation of this crime. There was a lot of boots to the ground, essentially, going and interviewing people.
They interviewed scores of people, the good old-fashioned way, going out and knocking on doors, shoe leather, things like that. So they pulled out all the stops on this case. They worked it for several years. They just couldn't quite crack it.
Mary's unsolved murder continued to haunt investigators.
When you have a case that's so horrific and you put forth so much effort and you're just unable to solve it. So I'm sure those detectives were quite frustrated.
It was very clear that he absolutely thought he was going to get away with this murder.
At the time of Mary's murder, as it turned out, we learned that he was living just about 2 miles from where Mary lived and from where the Star and Garter was. We were able to get that address through records because he was in the Navy and worked at Miramar.
I often wonder what perpetrators are thinking now that we have this amazing tool.
San Diego authorities investigating Mary Scott's murder kept hitting brick walls in their pursuit of justice.
Unfortunately, all of the number 1 suspects and number 2 suspects were cleared, and they were back to square one. Once you clear all your suspects, you're done. Unless something new comes up or you can think of something, the case is going to go unsolved.
But detectives remained hopeful they had the key to the case.
What stood out to me was that we actually had some quality physical evidence to work with. We just had to identify who the suspect was and who the donor of that physical evidence was.
They kept a watchful eye on any new technology that would give them their big break.
Every time there's a new tool to assist with investigating criminal cases is a win for investigators and for prosecutors, for that matter. And the development of investigative genetic genealogy is one of those.
Forensic genetic genealogy was a perfect fit for their investigation.
I personally was extremely excited about the prospect of being able to solve cases this way. I mean, this idea of being able to use public databases that are available in order to find family trees and use traditional genealogy methods in conjunction with the science to solve cases was extremely exciting.
Investigator Tanny quickly zeroed in on a name: John Jeffrey Sippos.
I was able to find genealogy records or public records that showed that the perpetrator had ties to San Diego where the crime occurred.
Investigators took a close look at his background.
At the time of Mary's murder, as it turned out, we learned that he was living just about 2 miles from where Mary lived and from where the Star and Garter was. We were able to get that address through records because he was in the Navy and worked at Miramar.
Detectives tracked the 75-year-old down.
He was leading what appeared to be a quiet life in a home with his wife in a small town in Pennsylvania.
When you confronted him at his home, what was his reaction?
Surprised. And definitely he wasn't expecting law enforcement to be knocking on his door. We told him we were there from San Diego and that we wanted to talk to him about a murder. But what struck us is that not once did he ever ask who had been murdered. He wasn't even curious about it. He never asked for any details and why we were speaking to him.
In the interrogation room, detectives focused on locking him into a story.
I showed him 2 pictures of her. One of his statements was, "I wouldn't know someone like that." So he was very adamant that he had no connection to her whatsoever.
How crucial was that statement in your case against him?
Quite critical because we had physical evidence that he was there and had been at the scene.
When he denied even knowing her or being with her, I knew he was the guy, right? It just no question. What went through my mind was, we got him. He's done.
Despite the DNA evidence against him, John Sippos stuck with his story and insisted he had nothing to do with Mary's murder.
He basically said, I didn't do it, and he wouldn't get off that. But he would say things to indicate that he devalued Mary's life. For example, he said, well, did she, when he was told that she was raped, he said, well, did she get what she wants? The whole thing was a lack of sensitivity and empathy and remorse for the victim.
Armed with the DNA evidence against him, John Jeffrey Sippos was charged with first-degree murder. At the trial, he entered a plea of not guilty.
He just sat there. It was just like it was all a big joke to him. He's a cold guy.
Prosecutors presented the jury with Mary Scott's terrifying last moments alive.
You think about young women out there and how vulnerable they can be. She was just getting home from a long night of work.
I believe that if he didn't follow her home, that he knew what time she would be home. And that once she was in her house, that he knocked on her door and forced his way inside of her home and strangled her and sexually assaulted her.
John is a big man. He's well over 6 foot, and I just can't help but think about that big man beating the life and choking the life out of little 5'2" Mary. It makes me mad to this day.
After a week-long trial, John Sippos' fate was in the hands of the jurors. After deliberating for less than a day, the jury found John Sippos guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced 7 years to life in prison. The statute of limitations had run out on charging him with rape. His sentence was the most he could face under California sentencing laws at the time. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. When it comes to community safety, we all have a role to play. While we value our privacy, it's important that we look out for each other and speak up when we see or hear something that doesn't seem right. When in doubt, call the police and let them investigate any suspicious activity. And if you're scared to report a crime, know that most local law enforcement agencies allow you to provide information anonymously. You can also report tips by phone at 1-800-222-TIPS or at crimestoppersusa.org. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.